Hello and welcome to Hot Pursuit. Today my guest is from Washington, D.C., Merve Tahiroğlu, Turkey Project Coordinator with Project on Middle East and Democracy. Welcome, Merve.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Good to see you. We are going to talk about Turkey, which is at the epicenter of much discussion these days with the EU, with the NATO, Washington, D.C. Let's start we will talk also about the foreign policy issues of Turkey. Let's start with the latest sort of dispute or topic that occupies many of us in the agenda. It was about a week ago, a video dating back 6-7 months with Joe Biden talking about American policy or envisioned American policy of his about Turkish government, Erdoğan, symbolized by Erdoğan. And this video went viral in social media. And up until last night, today is 25th of August, Tuesday, Erdoğan had kept silent, Turkish president, about the subject. Many other political actors were very vocal about this, very negative and critical about Joe Biden. And last night, a very furious Erdoğan lashed out at Biden, in a way complaining and whining about his attitude, Biden's attitude, saying that, look, how can you do this to me? We had some shared tea, we had shared some tea together over the table, and this is unacceptable, etc., etc., in his own ways, in his own style. How does it echo in the United States and in Washington, D.C.? We all know that the USA is very busy about itself and its elections, discussions centering around there. But one is almost sure that this issue was up on discussion. And how do you yourself read into this?
Thank you for this question. I do think it's one of the most important aspects that we can discuss with Turkish-US relations right now. Of course, in Washington, we just had the Democratic National Convention last week, where Joe Biden accepted the nomination officially to run against President Trump in the November election. And right now, we're having the Republican National Convention, where President Trump will again declare his intent to run in November. And so the U.S. public discussion is very much concerned with that as we approach the election. However, in Turkey, because as you mentioned of this resurfacing of this video interview that Joe Biden had done with the New York Times editorial board all the way back in December, and I believe it was published in January, the fact that this video and these remarks resurfaced has become a national conversation inside Turkey, because one of the many questions about foreign policy that Joe Biden answered at the time in that interview concerned Turkey, and the phrasing of the question was about how Turkey is increasingly becoming an authoritarian country, and how to deal with basically a leader like Erdoğan. And Joe Biden, as part of his answer, well, the main question was what to do with the nuclear weapons that that we all know the U.S. is storing inside Turkey in the Incirlik Air Base in Adana. But as part of his response, Joe Biden said that in Turkey he would support the opposition, and this really rose some fury from all circles in Turkey, including the opposition itself, which really came out and lashed out and saying we don't need your support. I think this is a really strange reaction coming from the Turkish opposition. I can understand why Erdoğan and the ruling party might consider these remarks anti-democratic or in a way that challenges the elected government, which is Erdoğan's government. But for the opposition to come out so strongly and to act as if Joe Biden was suggesting that he was trying to do regime change in Turkey is really strange, given that the opposition had not seen any sort of support or even acknowledgement acknowledgement from the Trump administration for the last 4 years. We've been seeing with the Trump administration, we have a U.S. government that is completely appeasing authoritarian leaders like Erdogan, but also like Vladimir Putin of Russia. All authoritarian leaders all over the country have gotten a boost out of the Trump presidency, which self-declaredly does not care about democratic process or governance around the world or human rights abuses. So leaders like Erdogan everywhere have been able to sort of get away with all of their transgressions domestically at home, their power grabs and human rights abuses. It has been like a carte blanche. So the fact that Joe Biden declares that if he were to be the president of the US, he would place a premium on democracy and human rights all around the world should be good news for the democratic opposition everywhere, especially inside Turkey. The good news is that the US public conversation is too busy with domestic development, so not really the Turkish conversation is not really echoing here. But I do think it's kind of strange that this has become such a campaign inside Turkey, and I'm calling it a campaign because I think the fact that the video was months old and it resurfaced now and has suddenly come to dominate Turkish politics really bears the hallmarks of a typical misinformation campaign, typical campaign to change the narrative away from the economic crisis that Turkey is facing, away from the aggression that Turkey is involved in the Eastern Mediterranean and all these other problems, and to create a new news cycle around this thing which is not even news.
Let's stick to the Turkish conversation or burning, treatment of Biden episode as a burning issue. The fact that Erdogan kept silent until Monday, August 24, and talking the way he did in the evening of that date, sort of saying how can you do this to me, like this type of style. Some people, there were different interpretations of it. Some observers interpreted as keeping the silence until now, having to speak after many days, showed some sort of undecidedness about his positioning, and some said talking the way he did at the end went burning the bridges with the possibly prospective president of the United States for good, because it is well known that Erdogan is keen on putting all his eggs in Trump's basket. And this possibly, according to this interpretation, put an end to any hope to make ties with Joe Biden. Another interpretation is that using the sort of how can you do this to me like rhetoric is still keeping some doors open with Biden should he be elected as next president. What is your interpretation of that?
Well, I think it's actually too soon to make or break relations because we are still far away from the election enough that whatever any leader says is not going to have that deep of an impact on, I think, the Biden team. What already has an impact on the Biden team is the relationship, of course, Biden personally had with Erdogan as vice president in the Obama administration, which also was not very positive. I want to actually remind our audience about some of the last few interactions that the two men had in 2016. Joe Biden had visited Turkey in 2016, right only months before the coup attempt, and then also went back after the coup attempt. He was the first US leader to visit Turkey afterwards, where he had to apologize for the United States sort of late response coming out against the coup attempt and supporting the civilian government. Of course, if we actually look at what unfolded during the weekend of the coup attempt, it wasn't so late. But it didn't seem as unequivocal as Vladimir Putin calling Erdogan really quickly, or the Iranian leaders. I believe it was Rouhani who called them at the time. so it wasn't as forceful, that reaction, but Biden was the one who had to go and apologize on behalf of the Obama administration's slow response. So already, and he was not treated well in Turkey. They sent some low-level officials to bring him in from the airport, to greet him at the airport. He did have a meeting with Erdogan, but he was basically spurned by everybody in Ankara during that visit. He was unwelcome at the time. So this was really his last visit to Turkey in an official capacity before he started running again. And I think that that is going to remain in Joe Biden's mind in terms of what kind of a leader Erdogan is and what kind of treatments he could get. More broadly, I believe that the Biden administration will see, just like the Obama administration did, the world in terms of, Democrats and autocrats, people who commit human rights abuses with impunity, and people who try better, who try to govern better and more democratically, and try to uphold an international system that is based on democratic values. This is something that the Trump administration clearly turned against. So we know that that is going to be very important for the Biden team. And Erdogan here represents a villain. He's a villain in that story when we look at the world through those eyes. So I don't think Erdogan's private outreach efforts to the Biden team, which we know is happening right now, whatever he says publicly, the Turkish president is very politically savvy, and he is preparing for the very real I believe, prospect of a Biden administration starting next year. So whatever outreach that they are trying to do behind the scenes, it's quite unlikely to work. The best they will be able to get out of a Biden administration will be getting a shoulder.
Because he's representing, as you say, a villain in the eyes of Joe Biden and his team.
Yes.
At the moment. Another subject important, because there were some developments in that one as well. Halkbank case does not seem to go away, does not seem to evaporate as Erdogan hopes. The latest development is, of course, the judge of the case, well-watched case, Berman, rejected the demands of the Turkish side to step back or step out of the case as the judge. It means that the Halkbank case will be one of the key elements from January on, should Joe Biden be elected as president. I believe the case next session is in March. And from that on, nobody can foresee what happens. But with Berman rejecting the Turkish side's demands is a new development. Maybe expected, maybe not. What is your interpretation of that?
Well, it's actually not that new, because Turkey demanded that he recuse himself in the previous trial into Deputy General Manager Hakan Atilla. So we actually have, this is a dance that they've been doing with this case and the previous case for now multiple years. I believe the first arrest of Reza Zarrab was in 2016 or 2017. So it's been ongoing since then. This is not going to go away. Halkbank's actions, the Turkish side might come out and make a moral judgment, saying that what we did, what we believe is in line with our interests, and therefore we went ahead and pursued those interests. They might make a moral case for their actions, but they can't make a legal case. At the end of the day, the U.S., what Halkbank did circumvent and evade U.S. sanctions, and it did it through money laundering, and it did it through bank fraud. It did so using U.S. banks and the U.S. jurisdiction, because it involved the transactions involved dollars, and the transactions involved the New York banking system and the SWIFT system. And this is
it is yet to be proven, isn't it? I mean, it's still an ongoing trial.
Well, yes, but based on the previous trial of Hakan Atilla, we saw evidence. There was clear evidence submitted by prosecutors showing that these transactions did take place. we could question whether secondary sanctions on a country like Iran should apply to a Turkish bank or to a non-American bank or not. That is a more, I guess, a theoretical conversation that we could have. But we do have evidence that this bank was used to transfer billions of dollars to Iran under heavy sanctions. So that trial is going to go on. I mean, this is going to be a core part of the U.S. justice system because it is a national security concern for the United States, and it will be tried as such. So I think the Turkish side, instead of trying to delay this trial by calling all of the people involved as FETÖ or terrorists and making these absurd claims, should really try to come up with a legal argument if it wants to defend itself, because and try to or accept it the way other banks have, like BNP Paribas, the French bank, which had also been involved in the sanctions busting scenario before, and do it in a way where it can be saving face and pay a fine, or sit through the trial, make the argument, and if they lose, then accept guilt and pay for it. But right now, Turkey's actions in trying to discredit the judge or the or any of the jury involved or the prosecutors, it just is not a good look. It looks unprofessional and conspiratorial.
The persistent speculation about what sort of team Joe Biden will assemble around himself is taking some sort of shape. There's speculation that Nick Burns, former ambassador now with Harvard Kennedy School, will be one of the key elements in the team, as well as Phil Gordon and Tony Blinken are the names that speculate. And those people are, maybe with the exception of Burns, who knows Greece more than Turkey, the people who are very knowledgeable about Turkey and its leadership's, its administration's patterns. Does it mean if this kind of assembly takes shape, there will be tough times for Erdoğan from next year on?
Yes, definitely. I think we would expect that because, as you said, the team is the foreign policy team that Biden is so far putting together is very knowledgeable on Turkey. They have the memory of the Obama administration years of dealing with Turkey, which is arguably the time when Erdoğan went from what looked like a conservative Muslim Democrat that the U.S. could not only work with inside Turkey, but also in the region, try to become a model for the rest of the Middle East, went from that to the Erdoğan we saw in the Gezi protests, no tolerance towards the opposition, cracking down on all sorts of freedom of expression. So in basically proving those people who were, before the Obama administration or even under the Bush administration, or in Erdoğan's early years, who were skeptical about whether Erdoğan was a true Democrat or could rule democratically or not, have been proven right under those years, and Joe Biden experienced that as part of it, and many people in this team have experienced those years as well. And ideologically speaking, again, they have this lens of looking at the world of the Democrats and the autocrats, and the people who are trying to uphold the liberal international order, and those who are working in ways that are going to hurt that order. And Turkey is very squarely in that second camp, has been in that camp really since 2014. Let's remember that these people have dealt with Turkey when it comes to fighting ISIS, and Turkey's unwillingness for many years to not only fight the group, but also to stop the flow of jihadis joining the group, materials going in to support the group, the oil trade, etc. So they have a very keen memory of Erdoğan as a highly difficult partner and potentially a Russian Trojan horse in NATO. So when this is your lens, it is going to be really difficult for Erdoğan. But I want to emphasize, because I am weirded out by the opposition's commentary coming out of Turkey, that doesn't necessarily mean tough times for Turkey at large. It means tough times for Erdoğan, and I think we in Turkey need to make that difference. do that distinction better. We keep telling our American friends that Turkey is bigger than Erdogan, but I'm worried that we Turkish people sometimes forget that.
As we speak, there is continued escalation in the Eastern Mediterranean, especially with the focus on Turkish-Greek dispute. And also in Libya, there are concerns that despite attempts for ceasefire, the actors, part of which is Turkey, and there are concerns that the ceasefire will be disrespected, and some forces will be targeting Jufra and Sirte, which is a red line for Egypt. There's tension there, but the real visible escalation is now in the Aegean. Erdoğan is reasserted his view about Greece again Monday night in a very clear terms and loud terms, threatening Greece and telling that from now on, whatever happens, it will be Greece is making its responsibility. Greece doesn't seem to blink because it feels it has European Union behind, especially France. But this escalation has as carpet, as ground, the blue homeland doctrine, which is based on Erdoğan administration claiming control over certain parts of the sea and claiming territorial rights over that, also enforced by Turkey's agreement with Tripoli government of Libya. This blue homeland doctrine, of course, seems to be going to continue to be the main dynamic. But one of the think tankers in Washington, D.C., Stephen Cook, thinks that blue homeland is not a strategy. It's basically a tool for what many see as irredentism of Erdoğan regime. But apart from that, the escalation goes on despite mediation efforts by Germany as we speak again. And concerns are rising about some sort of clash or military confrontation in the Eastern Mediterranean. What, in your opinion, is the real motive behind Erdoğan's drive to keep the escalation on certain levels, and even his will to escalate it further?
Well, it's definitely not natural gas, given that Turkey has just made a very big, in its own telling, a very big discovery of natural gas in the Black Sea, which from the perspective of, if we are thinking that Turkey in its actions in the Eastern Mediterranean are solely about Turkey's need for natural gas, and it's stemming from this need where Turkey really feels like it cannot be cut out of the exploration efforts, then this discovery in the Black Sea should have come as should have had sort of a calm down effect on Turkish actions in the Eastern Mediterranean. Perhaps Turkey could have said, okay, well, this is a contentious region where we're conducting this activity. Now that we've made this discovery, we should focus on that exploitation and maybe even halt the exploration activity that it's continuing in the Eastern Mediterranean. But it didn't do that. It's very much continuing. The rhetoric is continuing. As you said yesterday, he made this fiery speech. I believe he said something like Greece is behind every menace in the world, and which is quite aggressive. And there almost was a military confrontation just last week when the two sides ultimately called it an accident, that the Greek ship had come too close to the Turkish ship, and that there was an accident that they bumped into each other. But even that is a very strange explanation. I mean, these two ships should not have been that close and should not be confronting each other in this way. I believe just like Turkey's actions in Syria, which creates a constant threat of an accidental or planned clash between Turkish and US officials, soldiers in Syria, where, all of Turkey's actions and interventions in Syria have perpetuated that particular threat in the eyes of the US. In the same way, all of Turkey's actions in the Eastern Mediterranean are just perpetuating this potential conflict. The good thing is that the EU and the US have been sending their own naval vessels for various military exercises in this region, I think, to signal to both Turkey and to Greece that they need to de-escalate as much as possible. But right now we're in a situation where both parties are blaming each other as escalating, but we all know that Turkey really was the one that started this whole thing when it started sending its own drilling and exploration ships and sent the Navy with it. I think Erdogan's main concern here is that as Turkey has been
the issue is what drives Erdogan's agenda. Yes, as you say, it's the main concern is what?
Is what? So from the beginning, Turkey has been saying, and I think I want to bring this beyond Erdogan, because I think any Turkish leadership would say that that nobody should be drilling for oil or exploring for oil or natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean until there is a political solution to the Cyprus conflict, meaning unification between northern and southern sides of Cyprus. And they've had this line because they're worried that if the current exploration that is conducted through Cypriot licenses, and if that ends up creating any sorts of revenues for the Greek Cypriots, that the Greek Cypriots or the Republic of Cyprus will not share any of those revenues with the northern Turkish occupied section of Cyprus. And that's why they're worried about conducting any kinds of activities until there can be a particular unification. And they are blaming the EU, not so wrongly, for botching the peace talks back in 2004 when in the plan. But since then, Turkey has also been quite aggressive in its meddling of the domestic affairs of northern Cyprus, in escalating the political, in inserting itself as such an important negotiating partner that it really even took away the negotiations from the two Cypriot sides and almost hijacked it into its own as part of its own political agenda. So
but
I think,
isn't this to a great deal this frustration justified, because the European Union basically imported an unresolved conflict into itself, and that's what many see as one of the most foolish decisions that the European Union has taken.
Absolutely. I think, and that really creates a moral legitimacy for the Turkish side. And I think, we can talk about Erdogan's own irredentism, other Turkish political actors' irredentism, but regardless of these ideological foreign policy approaches, I think any Turkish side would look at the Cyprus conflict as inherently unjust to the Turkish side, both to Turkey in Ankara, but also to Turkish Cypriots. And that's why that is the main thing driving them. All the other maritime zone disagreements and whether islands should have an EEZ or not are, I believe, secondary to this primary concern about northern Cyprus being left out. And that is why Turkey is asserting itself so aggressively with deals with Libya, with its own exploration activity and its own naval vessels to basically rectify this injustice that it perceives very strongly, and most Turkish people do, to the northern Cypriots.
I see. Does this drive to keep crisis-based agenda for Erdogan, possibly until the American elections, possibly perhaps beyond? Does it have any tangible domestic policy concerns too?
Yes, I believe it does. And this is, I mean, we should also say that, you know, when Erdoğan is continuing this conflict base as he reasserts himself, it's not really helping the Turkish case. I mean, we got sanctions from the EU in 2017, 2018 because of Turkey's aggressive activities in the Eastern Mediterranean. So Erdoğan is not really winning any hearts and minds in Europe to the you know, otherwise just cause that morally just cause that he could present for Turkish Cypriots on behalf of them. Domestically, by keeping this crisis flaming in the Eastern Mediterranean, he is, just like with the whole resurfacing of the Biden interview and that story, it is a really good distraction from what is actually happening inside Turkey right now, which is we have a serious pandemic, which nobody is taking seriously, even though the numbers are rising and there is no real plan on how to combat a second wave and third wave of greater deaths. I'm really afraid of that, and everyone should be. But Turkey is pretty much open. Nobody's taking it seriously. The economy does not look good, even with the declaration of the new gas findings in the Black Sea region. I believe it was Fitch that recently came out with declared another outlook for Turkey in the medium term, and it just doesn't look good. I mean, the Turkish economy is not going to recover, and with these kinds of short bite good news declarations that might save the particular day, but it's not necessarily clear that it's going to save the week. We actually had the Turkish government saying that thanks to these natural gas reserves found in the Black Sea, it will in 2023, starting in 2023, will help close Turkey's current account deficit. That is simply untrue. It just doesn't work with the numbers. And so they're trying to create this distraction, I believe, until the next election, because Erdoğan, public support for Erdoğan is at its lowest that it has been in the last 17 years. And Erdoğan is very much aware of that and afraid of that, because as authoritarian as he is ruling Turkey, he is still beholden to elections because of his own self-proclaimed image as a Democrat. Populist, let's not call it a Democrat, but as a populist, as someone who has the majority of the public support. He simply doesn't have that, but he needs to keep that image, so he needs to keep winning elections. And this is the crisis abroad, particularly when it is enmeshed in this very just cause that much of the Turkish public believe in, which is to defend the rights of Cypriot Turks, then it really creates a very good domestic distraction for the people looking at Erdoğan as a savior, as a hero, as opposed to someone who has ruined the economy and has an irresponsible response to the pandemic.
Merve, final question. If we look at Turkey, meaning Erdoğan administration, in the context of the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean, on which you are constant observer of and expert of, earlier, as even expressed by Ibrahim Kalın, Erdoğan's spokesperson and right-hand man, there was, at the earliest stage, it was precious solitude that he mentioned, because at the end of with the collapse of the doctrine of zero problems with Turkey's neighbors, the loneliness, the solitude started increasing with Turkey's neighbors, starting with Syria, Armenia, and then going on. Cyprus was already there as a big problem, and then joined by Egypt, Israel, all of these powerful political actors in the region. And then this drift continued, or these choices by Erdoğan administration continued in the same direction. And now, for a while, we talked about alienation as the constellations continued as chain reactions to Turkey's assertive expansionist moves through Blue Homeland doctrine, etc., and also Syria policies. and buffer zone attempts in Rojava, and also attacks and cross-border operations into Iraqi Kurdistan, etc. And now some observers started talking about, with these constellations, France, Egypt, almost all the political actors in the Eastern Mediterranean, and with the exception of Malta, perhaps, which is only a small island, and also hesitant Italy, the rest are basically positioning themselves against Erdoğan administration, not necessarily against Turkey, but the leadership of Turkey. Are we at the stage of de facto containment?
That is a really good question. I think we are, but it's not. What would be the next step of after de facto containment? Maybe that's what I would ask, because I'm at the stage where I'm asking, are we at a point of breaking relations between Turkey and its traditional Western allies? So given that that is the question I'm asking, yes, I would say that de facto containment is a much earlier stage of that, and I do think that that's where we are. That's why we're seeing,
maybe we see a curtain raiser of it, because much of the debate is about Iran these days, with the Israeli Emirates deal and all the reverberations of that. But maybe regarding Erdoğan administration, it is a curtain raiser to that stage.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering.
I mean, looking at how Turkey has behaved in its foreign policy all across its neighbors, both in the Middle East and in the Eastern Mediterranean, I think this weekend was a really good microcosm of, if you want to understand where Turkey is headed in terms of its international orientation. This weekend, the news coming out of Turkey, primarily from a geopolitical point of view, was Turkey is in talks with Russia and China about the vaccine trials for the coronavirus. Turkey is considering, is in talks with Russia for the next delivery of the S-400s next year. Then Erdoğan brings in the leadership of Hamas to have a meeting with in Turkey, and that group includes Salih Ururi, a man that the United States government has a bounty on and is looking for. He's a wanted man for the U.S. point of view, because he's such an operative for Hamas. And Erdoğan hosts the Hamas leadership at the same time as all of this is happening. And so I think just looking at those headlines, we didn't even need Erdoğan's speech yesterday was like cherry on top, riling against the Biden speech, calling the opposition in Turkey too late and too weak in its response to the Biden speech, calling Greece the menace behind everything. It really gives an indication where Erdoğan is trying to take Turkey geopolitically. And, maintaining your friends on the in the transatlantic alliance is somewhat dependent on the new friends you're trying to build in the Middle East. Just like this weekend's meeting with Hamas showed us, Erdoğan's relationship with the Iranian regime, with Venezuela. That's another thing that just this weekend, Turkey is now saying it's going to import all these food with no tariffs from Venezuela, from all the horrible, horrible regime that we as the international community should be standing up against. Building these friendships is what, at the end of the day, costing Erdoğan the trust of the transatlantic community. And whenever there's a dispute between Turkey and another member of that community, yes, it will congregate the other actors around the other party, knowing how Erdoğan tends to behave and who he tends to befriend and how aggressive he can be otherwise. So I think the more democratic and pro human rights and current established international order leaders of the world are coming together, and often behind closed doors wondering how to deal with Erdoğan, and by deal with they mean how to contain him from causing more and more disruption, whether it's the Middle East or the Eastern Mediterranean.
One factor is, of course, Russia behind all those concerns, which some, in many ways, give Erdoğan perhaps a sort of the relative freedom that he utilizes in his own administration's advantage.
Well, Russia is a major component of this because, you know, the Turkish leadership is saying that what they really want for Turkey is an independent, truly independent foreign policy. They want Turkey to be able to pursue its own interests and whatever strategy it wants in the world without any strings attached. But you can't be truly independent and be in a military alliance with the United States and Europe, with NATO. You can't really do that. And we are living in a globalized world. Turkey, particularly because of its geopolitical reality, because of its position in the world between Russia and between the Middle East and the transatlantic world, is particularly exposed to the broader fighting between the two sides. For it to chart an truly independent foreign policy is a fantasy. What it means, going away from NATO really means more dependence on Russia, and Turkey has become more and more dependent on Russia just in the last few years with the Turkish Stream new pipeline going from Russia to Turkey that has increased Turkey's dependence on Russia for natural gas, not decreased it. Now Russians are building a nuclear energy plants inside Turkey. That is also increasing Turkey's dependence on energy on Russia, not making it more independent. The less Turkey wants to cooperate with the West, the more it is going to cooperate with actors like Russia, which will make it more dependent on it. Turkey is not becoming more independent. It is just becoming more dependent on worse actors on the international stage, like Russia, China, and these other countries, this new bloc, Venezuela, Hamas, those are the friends. Turkey is not lonely. It has friends. Its friends are Hamas and the Maduro government, horrific regimes.
Mm-hmm. Let's have it rounded up there. Merve Tahiroğlu from Washington, D.C., project coordinator with Project on Middle East and Democracy, POMED. Thank you for this conversation, Merve.
Thank you so much. It was always a pleasure.